Thanks for listening to the Forest Ramble Podcast. Please subscribe and leave a review on your podcast provider, as this helps other Forest supporters find our content. Now on with the pod. With results remaining inconsistent and a strange disconnect between atmosphere at the ground and what people are saying on social media, we look at Forest's midfield and if this is where matches are being won or lost. We also look at key personnel, including Lewis Grabban, and the remaining fixtures in the run-in in March's Forest Ramble Podcast. Welcome to March's Forest Ramble Podcast. I am Rich Ferraro and I'm joined by Steven Toplis. Hi Steven.
Hello.
So it's been yet another incredibly busy month at the City Ground. A whole host of things to talk about, but I think it's fair to say that the best place to start is actually stuff on the pitch. And let's talk about some of the results that we've had since we last had a podcast. We started off with something that was really quite satisfying, didn't we?
Yeah, beating Derby 1-0 at the City Ground a couple of days after our last pod, and that was a satisfying win for obvious reasons and important as well because it had been a couple of games since we'd last beaten Derby, so to get that win against them and a little bit of an unwanted run was crucial. And in terms of the table, it was also crucial because Derby being above us at the time, it pulled them back in, and it moved Forest closer to the playoffs. So, in terms of getting the 3 points, yes, it was satisfying, but it was crucial as well.
And the other thing was that it was great to see the kind of performance that the Reds put in on that particular night. I mean, in terms of tactics, and we've discussed this before. We did a mini match report. It wasn't massively pretty, but we discussed about the style of performance, the tactics, the application of the players. There was a lot to be happy about, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was all there for me, and it was. We knew that we had to do that against Derby because of. We hear that they were a great footballing side under Frank Lampard and they can pass it and so on. Forest had to defend well. They had to have energy in midfield and across the team, and they had to have the quality in the final third when they had possession because they had to make something happen. And for me, they did all of that. Defensively, they were very strong. They kept Derby at bay, with the exception of the one chance which Waghorn skewed wide in the first half. Derby didn't really have that much to shout about in terms of attacking because Forest kept them at arm's length.
Yeah, I mean, neither keeper really made a save as we reflected at the time. So if that's the case, well, to make the breakthrough early on and to basically, apart from that one chance, as you mentioned, to keep Derby well away from the goal, hey, you know what? That's pretty good.
And with Forest scoring so soon, there's always that risk that you've scored too early and you're just inviting the opposition to come onto you for the rest of the game. But Forest held out, and they were quite professional in how they did it. They did the work that they needed to do. Defensively, the work on and off the ball as well was good. So it was an encouraging performance because for me it had a little bit of everything.
And then from the sublime to the ridiculous, a 2-0 defeat at Stoke.
Yeah, and this one was frustrating because having beaten Derby, you want to take that momentum into your next game, and Stoke being in the bottom half of the table, it seemed like a good opportunity to carry on from where we left off, but it just never happened. And we know Stoke have got quality and perhaps are in a slightly false position in the league, but you've got to look at it on the day and think Forest should have tried to take something out of that game, but they never really looked like doing it.
And the other thing that I think is significant, because this is something we've seen a couple of times since, is the fact that for the first time since Martin came in with Milosevic and Ben Lawan, defensively we looked a bit shaky.
Yeah, there was some signs at the back that what had been going on before, where they'd looked quite solid and difficult to beat, it just wasn't there for some reason. And it's not the first time this month that we've seen that, as we'll come on to. But yes, that was a little bit of a worry, but at the time probably put it down to the fact of it just being one of those games, a bad performance by a couple of players, which can happen, and hopefully you get that out of your system and you move on and you bounce back from it. which they did in the following game.
Yeah, but it took a little while to get there against Hull. So from the sublime to the ridiculous to continuing to be ridiculous until it was sublime again.
Yeah, to be honest, the first half and the first 20 minutes or so of the second was a bit of a difficult watch.
Yeah,
in the whole game, it wasn't great, and yes, it was an improvement on Stoke, but there wasn't much in terms of attacking action, and it was a bit laboured from Forest, and it was only the introduction of Joao Carvalho and Karim Ansarifard off the bench when the game changed, and it was within a couple of minutes of coming on that Carvalho scored that fantastic goal and set Forest on the way. Yeah,
and the thing that was important there is that it showed, you know what, maybe there's options for Forest in terms of team selection and so on. Obviously, Carvalho hadn't really featured under Martin, so for him to come on and make such a big impression with such a great goal, that clearly made an impression on Martin. But then, in the next game, we play Ansarifard and we play Carvalho, and it didn't really happen for him, did it?
No, and it was just a poor performance against Aston Villa, and Forest never really got going. Well, they did to a point to take the lead early on, and they actually, for the first couple of minutes, looked like they were playing pretty well and they could go on and win the game. And then allowing Villa to equalise so soon after going in front just seemed to knock.
And again, it's a weak goal to concede.
Yeah, it was, yeah. I mean, nicely worked by McGinn, but you can't allow that sort of chance to come around.
For both Colback and Pantilimon, I couldn't help but feel that they both should have done better. And I also get the impression that it was very much a tactic to try and put the ball hard and low in the corners, knowing that Pantilimon's so tall it's hard for him to get down that quickly.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough, and it was it was just a disappointing night, and Villa got in front again. Villa went in front, and that was at 2-1. McGinn again with a shot from distance, and maybe Pantilimon could have done something better with that, but it might have been unsighted.
I think that's a decent finish. I wouldn't attach too much blame for that. No. I mean, two things that really kind of stand out to me from that match is that, firstly, I would actually disagree with you in that Forest weren't great, but I don't think they're that poor. I think it's just that you could tell that Villa had a team with more experience. They had a team of players who played in the Premier League for the most part. I would imagine that the lowest wage in that team would have been £40,000 a week. So I just think that Villa... And then the manager has been in situ just for that little bit longer than Martin, so he's managed to get Villa playing the way that he wants them to. So I think that that's... In terms of that level playing field, Forest aren't quite at the level that Villa are at. And then secondly, and this is something that if I go back to the Derby match, I think that match was won in midfield, because Forest midfield were harrying and pressing, and Derby's midfield ended up being beaten into submission, and that's exactly what happened the other way around with Villa. Villa were on it all the way through in midfield. They had that five-man midfield, and they deliberately chose very athletic and mobile players in Hourihane, McGinn and Grealish, and it left Forest overrun in the middle of the park.
It did, and the Forest midfield was ineffective. Yates probably had his worst performance in a Forest shirt. He didn't necessarily do anything massively wrong, but it was just the situation just wasn't in the game.
And I think that's possibly down to the fact that he was out of position as well.
Yeah, it could have been, and Colback as well, you mentioned there with for the Villa equaliser, he perhaps could have done better. He was one of the better players, but it still wasn't one of his best performances, even though he scored the goal as well, which was...
he didn't mean to do that.
He didn't mean to do it, no, but it looked a nice finish to dink it over the keeper regardless.
I think we've all scored one of those.
Yeah, well...
It just depends on how embarrassed you want to look about it afterwards.
Well, that's it, but to come on to... I think it is worth mentioning the officials. I don't want to go too much into this because...
Well, you had your say in the mini-match report.
Yeah. But the way that Villa were play-acting, the way Villa managed the game as well, they made it niggly and they broke it up a lot. And the referee allowed them to do that, which... Over the course of the game, it just kept going and going, and that's where frustration grew. And there was a lot of frustration from the Forest fans towards the referee, because I also think, in fact, he was giving the players too much protection, the Villa players. Grealish in particular, in light of what had happened to him a couple of days before at Birmingham, perhaps that's understandable, but it's still not exactly fair on Forest because, Forest players, if they went down, they weren't given many decisions.
Well, you know
Villa
what?
players throwing themselves to the floor, time wasting, and the referee didn't do anything about it.
I mean, I've made my views clear in the past, which is that I think that Premier League refs are woefully unsuited to reffing in the Championship. I think the pace of the game, the style of play, is very different to the Premier League, which is obviously why there is a gulf in class between the playing style in the Premier League and the Championship. But that's something that refs, you can't just drop a Premier League ref into a different division and expect him to be fully in control of it. And so I think that that's something that really showed through. However, I, again, would put an opposite viewpoint, which is maybe those Villa players were just more streetwise. Maybe that Premier League experience, the fact that the kind of levels that they've played at before, maybe that's just a sign that they knew how to play the ref better. They were more streetwise, more experienced. They were able to get those decisions from knowing how to do it. Whereas Forest, a player like Yates, he is a niggly player in terms of, but if he goes near Grealish is going down and gets a free kick. If it happens the other way around, it doesn't happen. Maybe it's the way he falls, maybe it's the reaction, maybe it's those kinds of factors. I don't think that the referee was biased. I don't, however, I would agree with you in saying I don't think he was in control.
Yeah, that's the key thing. I think he lost control of the game.
And I very rarely see a Premier League ref who's in control of a Championship game.
No, it's true, and the fact that he wasn't in control just played into Villa's hands, and it made their game that little bit easier, and it made it that little bit more difficult for Forest.
Then we move on to the next match. Now, again, referee's a talking point in the 1-1 draw away at Ipswich.
Yeah, and the talking point just before half-time, Forest put the ball in the net, Darryl Murphy, from a long throw from Robinson, and the officials rule it as offside and the goal doesn't stand. And then you look back at the replay and Murphy's miles onside. It's not even close.
Yeah.
And
is that an acceptable mistake to make in real time?
It depends on the angle that the linesman has, because I mean, I've run the line myself, not to any sort of professional level, but even at lower levels it's not easy. So I think sometimes you do have to give an element of, or the benefit of the doubt. But
the laws are supposed to say that the attacker's supposed to get the benefit of the doubt, doesn't it?
It does.
So if we look at another goal that was scored that same weekend, the Aguero header against Swansea, okay, how would you compare the two?
Well, there is no comparing. Aguero was clearly offside and the goal shouldn't have stood.
You see, actually, I don't think he was. I think in real time it's very difficult to tell whether he was offside.
Yeah. Well,
so that's the question where benefit of the doubt comes in.
Yeah, possibly.
Obviously, the thing about the Aguero header against Swansea is that raises the question about use of VAR. If we'd had VAR at Ipswich, then I think it's fair to say that the goal would have been given. But we didn't have VAR. We don't have VAR in the Championship. I think the thing that makes it hard to take is the amount of points. Now, depending upon your point of view, I would say that we've lost 6 to 8 points to refereeing decisions. The Ipswich one, I'm saying, is a little bit less clear-cut, partly because Ipswich also feel that they were denied a goal by the ref not being in control, and partly because it was before half-time, so there's no guarantee that in the second half it would have changed the result. But we look at the other ones, and we're not going to go into huge amounts of detail because we've talked about them plenty of times before. But Leeds, West Brom, and then the disallowed goal at Preston. That's 6 points, which are the difference between Forest being in the playoffs and not.
Yeah, and that's what it boils down to for me anyway, because we're not talking about one decision here or perhaps two decisions over the course of the season. We're talking about a number of result-defining decisions here, which, as you've just pointed out, that's having a huge impact on where Forest stand this season.
Yeah,
and
I'm a big believer that decisions even themselves out over the season, but not this year. No,
it's just been one after another, and that's where the frustration comes from. If they do even themselves out between now and May, we're due at least 6 points, possibly 8. From, I don't know where we'd get them from, but that's
But would that be fair on the other teams around us if that happens? Let's say referees give us a goal that proves to be clearly offside, then other teams are going to be grumbling about it, aren't they?
Well, they are, yeah, but then we can just look at that and think, yeah, well, maybe we've earned that little bit of luck because we probably should have had those extra 2 points, those extra 3 points already.
And refs make mistakes, that's okay, because everyone makes mistakes. Why should refs be immune from that? But things like the roof handball, the Gale dive, and then the not awarding the penalty to Lolly in the West Brom match, those things, I kind of... You question, is the ref in the right place? Is the ref actually analysing the match in the correct way? They are trained professionals. And then if we look at that disallowed goal at Preston, in real time, everyone's going, oh yeah, well, it's a foul. But then you look at it and you just see that the Preston keeper, when he realises the ball's going to Lolly with an open goal, you see he looks at that and then he goes, oh right, okay, I'm going down now, so it looks like I've been fouled. And the thing is, where's the comeback on that? Dwight Gale can get banned for 2 matches, but it doesn't give us the 2 points back.
No. And when it's so tight at the top of the league and when you're in the final run of the season and points are crucial, you do need every point that you can get. And I will throw the Ipswich one in there because let's say that goes in, it's 2-1 and Forest managed to hold on and win the game, then even as it stands now, they'd be a point off the playoffs and things looking a lot different. And it's the accumulation of bad decisions which have gone against Forest, which only make these seem worse. If it was the one decision, yes, we'd be a bit annoyed, but you could get over it, you could let it go. But we're not talking about one decision here, we're talking about 3 or 4 which can really change the course of a team's season.
Okay, so let me put this to you. I'm a big believer, just like with the thing about referees' decisions even themselves out in normal circumstances. I'm also a believer, though, by the time you get to the last third, certainly the last quarter of the season, and definitely by the end of the season, that the table doesn't lie. Is the table lying at the moment?
I don't think it is. I think Forest are just about where they should be.
So actually, if we had those 6 points or 8 points, then the table might be lying then in making us look better than we are.
It might well be, but then could we also just say, well, we're in the playoffs, so we deserve to be? Mm-hmm. It's a difficult one. I mean, I see your point, and if let's go back to the start of the season, if you'd have offered Forest this now, where they are, 38 games in, you're 3 points off the playoffs, we'd all have taken it quite happily.
Would we? Because, I mean, if we go right back to the start of the season, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, I like to do that. We were saying, actually, given the level of investment and given the number of players brought in, actually, we've got to be looking to be going for promotion or the playoffs. And at the moment, the playoffs is looking possible but improbable. Would you agree?
When you've got a 3-point gap, there's always that chance, and you never know. There can be a team that comes along and puts a bit of a run together. Villa have managed it. Their season looked over 7 or 8 games ago, but now look at them, they're flying and they're 6th. And
therein lies the problem that Martin O'Neill has identified. Now, I don't know if he's trying to do a bit of reverse psychology here, but he's pointing out that Forest haven't won 2 matches in a row since, September?
Yeah.
Now, is he doing that to try and get the players to sort of say, right, I'm going to show you we can do this? And of course, the other thing to add in there is that if it hadn't been for the decision at West Brom, if it hadn't been the decision against Preston, we could potentially have had 3 or 4 wins in a row if those refereeing decisions hadn't gone against us. So what looked like a decent run of being unbeaten would have become actually a very strong run, which would have cemented Forest's place in the playoff zone.
Yeah.
But the reason that Forest aren't doing so well is because they can't win matches in a row, and you look at the teams who have got themselves in good positions, like Villa, like Borough earlier in the season, like Derby. It's because they had little runs. Bristol City have done that. Bristol City go on runs where they win and then runs where they don't, and so that's put them there and thereabouts. Can Forest put that run together?
I still think they've got it in them to do that, and if you look at the team and you look at the players available, for me the key to making that happen is keeping the squad as settled, and certainly the starting 11 as settled as you can make it, because if you go through the whole season, we've not been able to have a solid spine of the team that plays week in, week out for one reason or another. Figueiredo, Dawson have both got injured. You've had Heffler at the back. Watson's been in the team, he's been out the team, he's now back in, and out again. Mm-hmm. You've had Yates come in, you've had Colback, who has been the one consistent, but there's been a lot of changes. Even Grabban up front has had his spells on the sidelines. So that spine has not been there, and we do need some more continuity and a bit more consistency in the team selection, and I think that would give us the best opportunity of putting a run of 4 or 5 games unbeaten with some wins in there.
So 3 players I want to talk about there. Number 1, Jack Robinson. He served his suspension. He's back in the team. That's only a good thing, surely.
Yeah, and I've said this a few times this season already. We just look a better team when Robinson's in there at left back. The balance and the way that he plays as well. It just makes the whole team look better because he's an important outlet on that left hand side. And as much as I rate Osborne and I admire him for the hard work and the way he plays the games and his willingness to play wherever for the team. Compared to Robinson, he's not much of a left back, and I'm not having a go at him. That's not his fault. He's being asked to play a position which perhaps isn't his best. And
it just goes to show that actually, in a way that I guess when you're a kid, I don't know if this is still the case. Maybe I'm showing my age here, but when you're a kid, you get shunted to fullback because you can't really play any other position. But actually, what Robinson has shown, and if we look on a broader level and you look at the way that a lot of teams play these days, particularly those who play a diamond in midfield, or Man City, for example, actually fullback is very much a specialist position, and Robinson, he can do a job at centre-half, but he's better at left-back, and Osborne, he can do a job at left-back, but Robinson's a better left-back.
Yeah, exactly. And him being out the team just highlights the imbalance that can occur in this side, because there isn't adequate cover, certainly at left back for Robinson. And
would it have helped if he hadn't got himself booked every other match?
Well, possibly so, but few Forest players are getting themselves booked and picking up consistent yellows, and it's just
Jack Colback's going for basically a booking every match at the moment. Yeah. There's still a possibility he might get a longer ban before the season's over because he's currently on 13 yellow cards and there's plenty of chance for him to get more. But, I mean, the thing is, of course, in the case of Robinson, I think what's really annoying is that some of those are really silly bookings, like for dissent and so on. And when you're a key member of a defence, that's something that Martin will want to sort out, surely.
Yeah, it's good that Robinson has that will to win and that passion and maybe a bit of fire in his belly, but he's got to make sure that doesn't translate into niggly yellow cards and bookings that he shouldn't be picking up.
And actually, I would apply the same to Colback, and Martin said the same himself, and that's why Martin's given Colback the armband in Watson's absence, is to try and make him more responsible. Not sure it's worked, to be honest. I mean, I've no problem with Colback being the stand-in captain, except for the fact he's not actually a Forest player yet. But I can see the logic of that. Right, next player I want to talk about, Lewis Grabban. Now, at the time of recording, which is in the international break, the word on the street is that Grabban is going to be in contention, at least to be in the squad, if not actually the team, against Swansea next week. That's got to be good news, hasn't it?
Yeah, we've missed him, and we've not just missed his goals, but we've missed his link-up play and the way that he holds that front line together. He's got the mobility, he's got good touch, and he's got the finishing touch when required as well. It's all there, and he is our most complete forward, and he's very important to the way that we play.
I would say that Murphy's, on the whole, done a very good job, but Grabban is more of a natural goal scorer. In fact, Martin O'Neill said as such. But the other thing is that I think Grabban's game has really developed over this season at Forest. Well, the bits of the season he's played. So he's got, in the start of the season, he wasn't scoring, he was looking a bit lost up front. He's actually added more movement, more work, he's become more attuned to the style of play. And, I can only put that down to good coaching from Karanka. That's the only thing I can think of, really, because he has become more of a complete player, but without losing the cutting edge in front of goal, unless he's taking a penalty.
Yes, and Lolly took a penalty against Hull in his absence, so
yeah,
perhaps it's going to be Lolly now.
And we'd had that conversation before, hadn't we? It's like, Maradona in the Midlands and said maybe it's because he's the only player in the squad who can take them. So, well, we know that Lolly can take a good penalty.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would be surprised if he takes another one.
Yeah. But Grabban's got 16 goals, so he looks on course to hit the 20 mark.
Yeah, well, he'd have 20 if he hadn't missed all them penalties.
Well, yeah, quite. So, yes, if I personally think if we are to get in the playoffs, we're going to need Grabban for the run in.
I certainly think that if there's a chance of us putting a run together, it'll be because Grabban's up front, scoring and creating chances.
Yeah.
All right, so the last one that I want to talk about for the time being, before we take a little break, is you mentioned the importance of having a settled team, a settled squad. Should Joao Carvalho be in that team? I'm
a big fan of Carvalho, and I will champion his selection every time. I think just the quality he brings to the team it's a level above anybody else in the squad, and we've seen the way that O'Neill wants to set the team up, and that's fine, and in certain games it's been very effective. If you look at West Brom, Forest looked great at times against West Brom. You had the Derby performance as well, which was very good, so you can see the merits of how O'Neill sets it up, and the reason he's been selecting the likes of Watson, Colback, Yates, even Pele in there, but he's been a bit up and down. But then it's just that quality and that composure on the ball. So that Carvalho brings.
Matt Letitia syndrome, okay? Is it worth having Carvalho in the team if for 20 minutes he does stuff and then the remaining 70 minutes he just is out of the game?
Yes, it is, to a degree, because in that 20 minutes he could create a couple of chances. He could stick one in the top corner, put in a free kick, put in a corner that leads to a goal. He's got all that in his locker, and that creativity and even that composure and that his range of passing just helps Forest to keep hold of the ball, dictate the play a bit more, dictate the tempo, and for me, we just look a better team when he's in there.
And Baz said something interesting. So I'd noticed that earlier in the season, when Carvalho was at his best, there's quite often link-up play with Osborne on the left of midfield, and that's because Carvalho was making those passes, but Osborne had learned to read them. Whereas at the first quarter of the season, he was making passes and he was ahead of everyone else. The other thing that Baz points out after the whole match was Carvalho and Lolly. They seem to really have a bit of an understanding, not necessarily in terms of the style of play, but after the goals, they were high-fiving each other, they were hugging each other. So again, if we've got players who've got some ability and are able to start getting that understanding, then surely that's a good thing. I mean, I personally agree with you. I think if we're going to do something good, then we need to be giving Carvalho as much chance as possible to influence those matches.
The Forest Ramble Sketch by Jeremy Davis. The traditional ex-footballers' occupations, such as running a pub or a newsagent, seem as far removed from modern-day reality as half-time Bovril and those spinning rattle things you see on Pathé newsreels. Even in the Championship these days, players can make enough money to see them comfortably into retirement. Plenty of big names have gone into showbiz, or even politics. But the news that former Forest forward Grant Holt is now a World Association of Wrestling star is perhaps the most surprising post-career move yet. Holt says his favourite wrestler as a youngster was The Undertaker, which puts me in mind of the story in Stuart Pearce's autobiography about Brian Clough telling an Undertaker to fuck off and die after he suggested Cloughy had put on a bit of weight. Forest fans may suggest that Holt the player bore more resemblance to a giant haystack. Whatever his record, he never had a reputation for going down too easily, so he's going to have to learn about exaggerating physical contact and going down at the slightest touch. I do hope Edin Dzeko has been in touch after the masterclass in simulation he provided against Porto to offer some advice on how to do it unconvincingly. Wrestlers are as famous for their nicknames as for their fighting prowess, and Holt could be a step ahead here, armed no doubt with a range of nicknames from his playing days, footballers being so renowned for the creativity and verbal artistry they bring to the art of nicknaming. Apparently one of Holt's former nicknames was Horse, which doesn't have quite the same ring as the likes of Hulk, The Rock, or Wolfman. It's probably a good thing that legendary 60s winger Alan Hinton looked elsewhere for his post-football livelihood, sporting as he did the name Gladys. Delving a bit deeper into the archives, though, we could definitely put together a tag team of former Forest players with decent wrestling monikers. The likes of Tank and Psycho are obvious candidates, but given Forest's unique and idiosyncratic history, we can surely find a few candidates from a bit further left field, and I'm not talking about Andy Reid, that might just strike fear into the other spandex-clad supermen. Gary Crosby was called Meatfly, which, with a bit of imagination, can be made to fit the image of an athletic wrestler who jumps around making mincemeat of his enemies, with the aid of a lot of flying kicks. Cod Eye, as Steve Sutton was known, could almost be some dude in a plastic fish mask who reels opponents in before disorientating them with his fishy breath. On the subject of goalkeepers, there's another 80s icon whose alias could make him the ideal sparring partner for R. Grant. Step forward Mark Crossley, whose nickname suggested not just a tough wrestler, but also a handy appliance to have around if Holt was to get intimidated by any of the guys across the ring. No, not Big Norm, but the name Cloughy bestowed upon him before he made his debut against Liverpool, Shithouse. Now you definitely want one of those in your corner.
Thank you there, Jeremy, for the Forest Ramble sketch. Stephen, let's talk about Martin O'Neill. One thing that's interesting, and Radio Nottingham were talking about this in their latest Forest Weekly podcast, is that there's a lot of positivity in the ground. So if you look at the whole match, where we were being held at 70 minutes, a year ago, that would have had the natives getting restless. But there was still a good degree of patience. You look at the Villa match, where, again, being beaten 3-1 at home after winning, after just a couple of minutes, people would have been quite tetchy. But actually, most of the ire, what was there, was just frustration directed at the referee.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think we can agree there's a good degree of positivity from those attending the match. You look on social media, it's like the world's ending. What's going on?
It's indicative of social media, and I think there are a lot of young kids out there. These are the ones who I've seen anyway on there, who are more critical of O'Neill, and these are perhaps the ones who haven't seen O'Neill play for Forest, have no memory of him being a Forest player, no memory of what he achieved in a red shirt, and
do you not
the
think
part he played in the great days.
It's maybe there's just as many people as sort of maybe middle-aged people with an axe to grind who are just, there's a particular hashtag, which I'm not even going to mention because I don't want to give it the oxygen of publicity, a particular hashtag that was doing the rounds for a day or two, and basically saying that they didn't want O'Neill at the club. And I got the impression that was middle-aged men who basically like to just moan about everything.
Yeah, there is that group as well, but...
And maybe this is just actually a societal thing in terms of right, at the time, we have no idea if Brexit's going to happen. We've got economic uncertainty. We've got, all kinds of things. We've got terrorist atrocities going on in the world. The world's not necessarily a nice place to be at the moment. And, of course, social media seems to be a magnifying glass on the frustrations of people.
It does, and it gives people a platform to air views which sometimes are over the top and are uncalled for or just simply nonsense.
Do you think that the people who are, and I know there's no definitive way of defining this, but do you think the people who are complaining about O'Neill and his tactics and so on, are they actually going to the games?
It's a good question. There are people in the ground who are moaning. I hear people around me, the occasional voice of discontent, if you like, but yes, the fans do seem to be behind the team and behind the manager, largely within the ground. Mm-hmm. Maybe some of it is just down to social media. People just... It's 10 to 5 on a Saturday, Forest have lost, they've got the phone in their hand and they just feel like venting. Yeah. And they'll just post total...
So, obviously the main criticism is that Martin O'Neill, he's outdated tactically. Now, I would dispute that. I mean, I'm not going to say he's got it right every time, because he hasn't. But... what I would say is that those matches we talked about in part one, he showed a good degree of tactical acumen in terms of how he set up the team in each occasion. He made changes against Hull that were able to liberate the midfield a little bit and create those chances for Forest to score 3 goals in the last few minutes of the match and create what was actually a handsome win. So I don't think that strikes me as being someone who's tactically not adept.
No, and if you look at the performances of individuals, Lolly is actually rejuvenated a bit under O'Neill. He'd had a slight dip for a couple of games, but he's come back strong and he's back to his best and what we saw of him earlier in the season. You've got Yates, who's come in, a young lad, and hasn't looked out of place, and he's been encouraged to play his game, and he's made to feel part of the first team, and you know, he's really risen to that. You've got Robinson, you've got Ben Alawan, you've got Milosevic as well, who've been brought in by O'Neill. They're performing. I think Pantilimon has largely been good as well. So the team are performing, and individuals are performing. If you look at when we've had to change managers before, around this time of year, and we've had somebody come in, whether that's a caretaker or a permanent, we've tended to plummet down the league. We've had
the season gets written off, doesn't it?
We'll have a little bit of an upturn, and then it'll just go back downhill, and in some cases we've nearly ended up getting relegated off the back of it. Whereas we've not really done that. If anything, we're closer to the playoffs. We might not be in terms of positions, but we are in points because of just how tight it's gotten up there.
Okay.
So we haven't lost ground, and I wouldn't say the season's gone backwards under O'Neill. It's a slightly different approach, of course, which it will be under a new manager, but I don't think it warrants the doom and gloom which some people would have you believe.
And I say, the only thing I can recommend is actually sometimes just switch your phone off. Just don't open Twitter, don't open the message boards and the forums and the comments sections, because no one's going to gain anything, are they? I'm going to just change subject slightly. Let's talk about the exciting stuff that has been announced in the last month, which is the plans for the stadium redevelopment. Obviously, the drawings look amazing, and I have to say is that the attitude shown by the club, by the media, and by the architects themselves, they've done some really great PR about it. Now, the thing that is good is obviously if we've got a ground that actually doesn't look quite as weird as it does now with the Bridgeford end, and we get a stand that is less than 70 years old in place of the main stand, then that's a good thing. Okay. The bit that I want to focus upon actually is that this is stuff where it's a really important investment by Marinakis and the club hierarchy. But also, it's an investment in the sense that the club can become more self-sustaining. Commercial revenue is something that is a really important part of the game these days, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a vital element which we've been missing out on for years, and we've been aware of that as well this whole time. When you look at stadiums at Derby and Leicester going up with big commercial facilities and the corporate facilities, everything, it's all there. They're making money off the back of that, and that's money that Forest could be earning, because Nottingham businesses might be going out to Derby, to Leicester, and going out of Nottingham to make use of those facilities. If they're in Nottingham, you're going to keep those Nottingham businesses spending money.
So it's not just on match day, is it?
No, exactly. It's generating money when the team aren't playing. Yeah. And that's just the way modern football is, and that's how a club should operate. You've got to make the most of those opportunities.
And although I haven't seen the figures, the sort of, I think it's something that I heard talked about recently, whereby actually when you look at comparable clubs in the Championship in terms of league position, Forest have got one of the smallest commercial revenues of all of those clubs, which could be a legacy of being 20 years out of the Premier League and having gone down to League One in the meantime. Could be that, but also, you know, when you think about the fact that Forest are in, one of the major football club in the major city in the East Midlands, they need to be capitalising on that, don't they? Literally capitalising on it.
They've got to live up to that status.
Yeah.
And the stadium hasn't been touched in terms of major development for 25 years. So that's a quarter of a century since the Trent End was built.
Yeah.
And that just goes to show you that how far behind they've fallen in that regard. Because back when the Trent End was built, there wasn't this push of commercialism and corporate side of the game as much in football as there is now, and you wouldn't have thought of building those kind of facilities within a football ground, but obviously over the years that's become more important.
And you look at clubs with new stadiums like, I know Man City Stadium isn't that new anymore, and the Emirates Stadium, just to use a couple of Premier League examples, and they're all built around not just creating a good experience for the fans and the club and the players, but also to be money makers. Particularly the Emirates. I mean, I'm sure they make more money out of conferencing than they do on actual match days. because that's just the way of the modern world. And the other thing I would say, and this is something whereby I have seen some figures, and the excellent Swiss Ramble Twitter feed put some figures out from Forest's financial performance over the last financial year, and there were some really interesting figures which basically showed that, you know what, Forest aren't making any money commercially, and they've really got to try and address that. It's not a very exciting topic as a football fan, but again, does this give you confidence in the club hierarchy and the approach they're taking?
It does, definitely, and I think it's encouraging because you're seeing them invest in the football club and the future of the football club. And also the fact that we're staying at the City Ground, we're going to be on the same plot of land that we are now. We're not going to be moving out to some soulless bowl in the middle of a retail park 15 miles outside the city centre. You know, we're going to be where we are now, our home, which has been for over 100 years. That's crucial. It just generates a feel good and a positivity among the fans, because none of us really want to move. The City Ground's iconic to Forest fans, and rightly so. And if there's a chance we can stay there, we've got to make the most of that, which these plans appear to do. Yeah. We're upgrading facilities which should have been upgraded a long time ago, but we're doing it, and we're going to increase the capacity, so we're going to get more fans through the turnstiles, on top of all the commercial and corporate benefits that come as well. And it just makes the club look better, a forward-thinking, modern, positive football club, and that's exactly what you want.
Okay, so a couple of things come to my mind there. So, number one, you mentioned about it's iconic to Forest supporters. You know what? Actually, it goes wider than that. Talking to one of my friends the other day who's not from Nottingham, has been living here for about 3-4 years, and she was saying, yeah, actually, it does look amazing when you go over Trent Bridge, doesn't it? And so, actually, even if you haven't got the slightest interest in that kind of thing, you just go past it and you just go, yeah, that looks good. And then, secondly, the idea that in terms of being more modern and so on, if under Fawaz it had been announced that the ground was to be redeveloped, I would have said, well, what's the point? We're never going to fill it. Actually, Forest are getting near enough full houses most weeks these days. So it just goes to show that if the club is run in a way that people believe, that actually you build it and they will come.
Yeah, and this comes on now to the current hierarchy. They've done a fantastic job of repairing the relationship with the fans, because we're in the Championship, we're not at the top of the league, we're on the periphery of the playoffs, but games are selling out, and the fans are coming and they're enjoying it and they really feel part of the club, and that there's been some brilliant work going on behind the scenes to restore that relationship, which was damaged under the Fawaz regime. And the important thing now is to keep those fans there and then build on it, sell even more season tickets, hopefully get in the Premier League, more fans coming in, more interest coming in off the back of that, and the club will grow hopefully, and they're going to fill this 38,000 capacity, which, sorry Leicester fans, but it's going to be the biggest stadium in the East Midlands, and about time as well. Okay,
so just to finish off, you've told us what you think about the manager and the team. The odds that I heard a couple of days ago were Forest 10-1 to make the playoffs. Do you think Forest will make the playoffs?
I want to be positive and say yes. I think that they've got a good chance. They just need a couple of wins. If you look at the games which are coming up as well, it's a real opportunity to get points on the board. So Swansea at home next. Difficult game, but certainly winnable. Then Rotherham away. Sheffield Wednesday away. They are around us now in the table. They've picked up a bit, but you could get something at Hillsborough. Blackburn in there as well. You've got Middlesbrough coming up, who they seem to be on their way down, and they could be one of the teams that drop out the top six. They're on a bad run of form. You could easily see
Does
Forest
having Middlesbrough towards the end of the season remind you of the promotion season 20 years ago? Because where we beat them 4-0 and basically we put ourselves in contention and knocked them out of contention for automatic. I literally just thought about that. But, I mean, what's interesting is we've got those fixtures against teams who aren't rivals to us, like your Rotherhams, and your Swanseas. But then we've also got, Sheffield Wednesday actually has become a 6-pointer. Middlesbrough is a 6-pointer. And in a way, I like that, because if we get the points off them, they ain't having them.
Exactly, and we've risen to the occasion, if you like, against some of the big teams in this league. We've put in big performances and we've won games. We've beaten Sheffield United. We go away there in the next couple of weeks. We've beaten them at home.
Yeah.
We've drawn with West Brom, but probably should have won those games. Certainly the away one.
Drawn and beaten Leeds.
Yeah, beaten Middlesbrough away. So we've gone and got big results against the big teams. So the Forest have definitely got it in them to make a push for the top 6 and get in there. And with it being only 3 points, there's every chance that they can do it.
Okay. Bit of concern, right? So teams like Rotherham and at the other end of the table, Sheffield United. The thing about both of those teams is for very different reasons. They're playing with a lot of freedom at the moment. Rotherham kind of know they're down. They know they're kind of planning for next season. They're fighting, but they kind of... it's one of those things whereby if they stay up, it's a bonus. So they're playing like, if we stay up, it's a bonus. So they're playing with a lot of freedom. Doesn't mean they're always getting the results, but could that be a banana skin?
It could be potentially in the same way that the Ipswich game might have been a banana skin, because they've also gone on a similar kind of run to Rotherham, and the shackles seem to have been released on them because they've almost got a free hit now. They've got nothing. They've got something to play for, obviously, but they're as good as down.
Yeah.
So yes, there is a potential for that, but I would also hope that Forest look at that situation, look at the game on merit, and say it's Rotherham. They're down the bottom, and if we want to get promoted, and if we want to be a serious playoff team, you've got to win games like that, and you've got to put those teams away.
Okay, and Sheffield United at the other end of the table, by that point, they might already have been promoted. So, I mean, even if not, they'll be on such a roll, because I think it's fair to say that they are going to go up. And they might be on such a roll, and again, the influence of their manager, settled team selection for the most part, but even when he shifts things around, everyone knows their job, and that's the most impressive thing about Sheffield United. So again, they're playing with freedom. Again, could that be something that plays against Forest?
It might well be, but given that Forest have already beaten them this season and they know how to play against them, that's going to give the players confidence. And I would back O'Neill to go up to Bramall Lane and get a result. I think tactically he'd be able to do something that ensures Forest come away from that game certainly unbeaten, but hopefully with all 3 points.
Okay.
I think a point there, out of that, a point at Sheffield Wednesday and a point against Sheffield United, they're not bad points by any means. So it comes on to the other games, and if we can win 4 out of those 6 games, I'd be fairly confident that Forest could get into the playoffs.